I just reset my whole system. So I think through the help of Scott Jensen, my buddy, I think I got everything going here for the live stream. So I want to talk about the House of Representatives, how things have just gone from from chaotic to uncertain to frankly just weird, really weird here in the last 24 hours. I'm going to just pull up I always do this here. I pull up my stream on my iPad to make sure we're looking good here. So let me just do that real quick. And it appears we're in good shape. Let me just make sure the volume is down. Should have been on top of that before, but here we go. We're looking pretty good. I'm going to let some folks get a second to tune on there so I can watch the comments. So, okay, so if you're watching this, you're probably following the politics and you're probably aware of what I would call an unprecedented, loose, weird, bizarre chain of events that occurred a few nights ago, and why that has led to just a major kind of turning things upside down on their head in the House of Representatives. So for the folks watching, we had the election over a month ago. It was very close. There was kind of basically, when you count Louise Stutz, who probably would go with, she has been with the coalition for a while, you're looking at 2020, right? So even if somebody goes over on the partisan lines, it's 21, 22, it's going to be very close to how it's been the last several years with these razor thin margins in the House. So there's two races right now that are under litigation. There's the David Eastman ongoing trial about the Oath Keepers, which I think is just nonsense, and he should prevail from that. But that's a trial that's ongoing. And the second one is a Jenny Armstrong case about her residency. So you have a Republican, David Eastman, whose election's under litigation. You have Jenny Armstrong, Democrat, who won the West Anchorage seat. So those are two things that are out there. But anyways, you have 19 incoming freshmen. Of 40 representatives, you have 19 freshmen. Now, two of them, Craig Johnson and Dan Sadler, were former representatives, but they've been, Craig Johnson's been out since 2016, or he lost the Senate race, which I was in actually in 2016, and then he's been gone for 6 years. And then Dan Sadler's been gone since 2018. He lost to Reinbold. So they've both been gone for a while. 17 others have never served in the legislature. Some of them have been staffers. Several of them have served on kind of local government. But anyways, you have a huge number of new people coming in the legislature. You also have that combined with the last four years or last two elections in 2018 and 2020. The House hasn't organized for a month because of these very thin margins and this kind of narrow partisan divide. So anyways, a couple days ago, the incoming freshmen had an orientation in Anchorage at the Legislative Information Office. All the freshmen were, I think all but one or two were there doing a orientation. And during this orientation, they did some team building exercises. I guess it was consisted of, here's an issue, here's how you vote, walk to either side of the room on how you'd vote. And during this, some of them got kind of to talk, and hey, we're closer than we thought on some of them. I mean, you have like Jamie Allard and Frank Tomaszewski, very conservative. You have Genevieve Mina, Andrew Gray, very progressive. A lot of big mix, and we're going to pull up the list here in a second, show you what we're talking about. But the team building worked because afterwards, many of them went to Matanuska Brewing Company in Anchorage, in Midtown. Shout out to Matt Tomter. Love that guy. And during this dinner, they were talking about kind of theoretically, what if now the way it works in the House is you need 21 people. The magic number is 21 to get to a speaker. So they have 19 freshmen. So it got to chatting, and what if the 19 of us got a couple of the incumbents, maybe some of the newer ones, or some of the other people in the legislature, in the House, and what if we formed a majority? Anyway, at first it sounded like theoretical, kind of just having a beer talk, but then it got a little more serious because everybody realizes how screwed up it's been the last several years. There's been big fights within the Republican side, the Democratic side. There's kind of the old guard. Andy Joseph been around a long time. Bryce Edgman, who was former speaker. You have Kathy Tilton on the Republican side, who's been around. And then you have a whole bunch of like Kevin McCabe, Laddie Shaw, Tom McCabe. You have these kind of other group of people that's, Ben Carpenter, who's on the Republican side. But then you have the Democratic side too, the progressive side. You have Edgman, Josephson, Zach Fields. And they've been around for, Fields is a little bit newer, but they've been around for a little bit. Edgman's been there since 2006, and they kind of have their way of doing business. Well, anyways, during this conversation, at some point, it got more serious, almost to the point where they were like putting together an organization. And during this, they decided they needed a few more people, incumbents to join them. And Andrew Gray, who's an incoming Democrat from East Anchorage, texted Sarah Hannon, because Sarah Hannon right now is chair of Ledge Council. She's from Juneau. And they were going to basically extend an offer to her to join this new majority and be the majority leader. So he texts to her. He says, hey, here's this thing we're thinking about. Here's what we're thinking. Do you want to join? And then she responded, well, where would I be? And he said, majority leader. Except it wasn't Sarah Hannon. It was Sarah Vance. He texted, the very conservative member from Homer, which I can't even imagine when he realized he was talking to Sarah Vance and not Sarah Hannon, how that went over. So then it just got like, all of a sudden shit got real, because even though it probably still wouldn't have been contained, this because when people start talking and trying to maneuver, the word gets out, but then it got, all of a sudden it got really out. So ever since then, I eventually get the information. I do the article. I'll show you guys a list they kind of came up with, and a lot of it's theoretical, but several of them, I've talked to several of them on both the Republicans and the Democrats, and it's not, I mean, it's a crazy sounding prospect, the idea that a bunch of freshmen would form a majority built on kind of the freshmen instead of built on partisan, because it's very split. Let me pull this up here and show you guys a list of incoming. Check this out. Okay, so this is my sheet I came up with. So of the 19, right, you have a mix of Republicans, 9 Republicans, 8 Democrats, 2 independents. So you got like Rebecca Himsh, and a lot of these people, the other thing is a lot of these people are young. Andrew Gray, Stanley Wright, Jesse Sumner, Will Stapp, Ashley Carrick, Genevieve Meany. These are younger people. And that's part of the dynamic as well going on. I think a lot of them see the people that have been around for a while who contribute to a lot of partisan chaos that we've seen in the House the last 4 years. Maybe that's one of the principles they're looking at, coming together under. Anyways, you got Himsher, independent, Ruffridge, Kenai, he beat Ron Gillum, Republican. You got Craig Johnson, he's kind of coming back. Julie Colomb, Elise Galvin, independent. Jenny Armstrong, she's under litigation, young, Democrat. Cliff Groh, he's older, Democrat, but he's kind of a little one of the older guy, but he's kind of hip. Genevieve Mina, younger. Andrew Gray, I think he's like late 40s. Donna Mears, Stanley Wright, Republican, younger. Jamie Allard, Dan Sadler, he's been around, but he's coming back. Jesse Sumner, North Matsu Borough Assembly, but he supported Tim Hale, and he was defending Sabrina Combs in the recall there, that stupid recall earlier this year. Maxine Diebert, Will Stapp, Republican, younger. Frank Tomaszewski, Ashley Carrick, former staffer, younger. And then CJ McCormick, who I think he's not really super involved in this. I don't know if he was even at the orientation, but he's very young. He's 23 or 24, maybe 25 from Bethel. So you got a whole group of new people, very young people. And now here's the problem. Now that the word got out, one of the big issues here is on both sides, like the Republican side and the Democratic side, kind of the old guard, all of a sudden they see these people actually talking to each other and actually talking to the other side, talking to people who are very politically different than them about organizing. And that's like, that creates a trust problem, because now they're thinking, well, wait a minute, can we trust them? Are they gonna try to do something else? Even if they come and we do organize something, are they gonna be talking to these people? What's going on? So under the plan, under the kind of maybe even call it a plan, under the concept, which is the very maybe most interesting part about the whole thing, is Craig Johnson would be speaker. Now, Craig Johnson, the former rules chair, is an article I did. You can go to thelasklandmine.com and read it. Former rules chair, very partisan, but in the Republican makeup in the House, there's all these new people. McCabe, new, but they've been around for the last 2 or 4 years. McCabe, McKay, Laddie Shaw, Tom, I'm trying to think who else. There's a bunch of them that have Ben Carpenter that have been around, and they don't want Craig Johnson and Dan Sadler coming in and kind of shaking things up, because they've been there and in the trenches the last 2 or 4 years. So under this kind of concept, Craig Johnson would be speaker. He would never be speaker with the Republicans, but he could be speaker with this kind of new group. You got Frank. Now this is very conceptual, but Frank Tomaszewski, who'd be an incoming freshman in this setup as rules chair. Sarah Hannon, who's from Juneau, who's elected a couple years ago, would be majority leader. Dan Sadler and Cliff Groh be finance co-chairs, along with Delana. They'd have 3 co-chairs like the Senate's doing, along with Delana Johnson if she accepted it. And then you have all these other positions here that would be, various chairs of committees, and you can kind of look at the article. But the interesting thing is if the Republicans organized or the Democrats and Independents organized a majority, very few, if any of these freshmen would be getting any positions, would be getting any gavels, or would be having any kind of power in the organization. So, but in this concept, they would all be getting some kind of gavel and chairing some kind of committee. So what's happened is the old guard, especially kind of like Bryce Edgman and people like, he's watching this and thinking, okay, nothing's going to happen. We'll go back to Juneau. Everybody's going to be in the building. It's going to create a lot of pressure, and we'll take advantage of that with all these new people. And eventually we'll give outs, and we'll force people. Somebody's going to, blink and form a majority. Well, now that's a month out, start a session. And now this whole talk has started, and it's out there. Everybody's aware of it. I've talked to several legislators who, one of them just said, I don't even know what to say. This is so weird and so preposterous that I don't even know how to talk about it. So this changes the whole dynamic of how they're going to organize either side. Now that a bunch of conservative freshmen and progressive freshmen are talking to each other and really serious about the possibility of trying to organize together. And it's weird because a lot of them have said things like they would never do this. They would never, most of the Republicans would never organize with Democrats, but some of the Republicans, incoming freshman Republicans, are really excited about it. And maybe it's because they don't want to deal with the old guard taking over either side and then having them be kind of marginalized or not given any positions in the majority. So what it's done is it's created a lot of just uncertainty among the old guard, both sides, the conservatives and the progressives, or the Republicans and Democrats. And it's really going to, if this doesn't pan out, which probably it's unlikely because it's never happened before, if this thing doesn't come together somehow, and last day, people who normally answer the phone and chat have been much less chatty, which tells me they're starting to really, because when people start talking and when it starts coming together, and things do move really fast when it does come together, they don't want to talk because they don't want to risk something happening. So it just puts everything on its head. It really changes the dynamic of how the House is going to organize. And before, it was built on very partisan lines. The Republicans are sticking together, the Democrats and a few independents are sticking together, and you have this kind of line in the sand, and whoever blinks, who comes over, how do we get one or two more to form a majority? Well, now there's a third option, is a bunch of progressive and conservative freshmen being another block. So when you start to get to like 18, 19 committed people, you need 3 or 4 more people, that's it, to come over. So if they got, just theoretically, if they got Delana Johnson, Calvin Troggy, and who else was I thinking about? Delana Johnson, Calvin Troggy, maybe Dan Ortiz, potentially Josiah Pocketalk. If they started to get Mike Cronk, there's another one. If they started to get 3 or 4 of those people to say, okay, we'll do it. And again, they're going to be jockeying for positions, and a lot of it's about what position they get and leadership. It could happen. It's very unlikely. It's almost theater of the absurd, but it's one of those things where it's like, it's so crazy. I mean, it could work until, if it did happen. Think about when things get really intense on the budget and on some social issues could come up, and the dividend amount and school funding. I mean, that's what all of a sudden, if that were to happen, you'd have all these people diametrically opposed on some issues together in a room trying to agree to, and then you'd have the minority. You might have, if this were to happen, you might have 2 minorities, a minority of progressive people, a minority of Republican conservative people, because all the people left over wouldn't really be aligned politically. So you could have a weird fractured minority, a large people, not in the majority, but who aren't together in a minority. So it's like I said, it's a very odd situation. It's unprecedented. It's shaking up the whole way the House would organize in any case, either with Republicans or Democrats. And it's going to be something to watch here. I mean, we got, Christmas coming up next week and the New Year. And after that, people are going to start going to Juneau. But one of the other interesting things is when they were all together at the LIO and then at Matsu Brewing Company, they started talking about this. But then people started leaving. People started going back to Fairbanks and going home and going out of town. So, and what I've heard from several people is once this word got out, a lot of the very partisan interests, Republicans and Democrats, started calling these people and saying, what the fuck are you doing? I mean, this is like a lot of pressure all of a sudden. Do not do this. You can't do this. You have no idea what you're doing. This could end up as a disaster. It's also challenging the power structures and dynamics that have been around for a long time. So I don't know what's going to happen. I think it's a crazy concept, but when I first heard about it, I didn't believe it. But then over time, I talked to more people, and I realized it was not a joke, and it could really end up being just a weird organization, no matter how it organizes now, because now it's clear that several people who never were considered to be willing to work together or allies now are willing to work together, at least talk about organizing a majority in the House. So I'm watching this real close. These things do happen very fast when they come together. Other thing is, even if they were to say we have 22 people right now, if they were to come together and have a press conference or an event and announce a 22-member majority, bipartisan, they still have to come together, come to Juneau and vote on the floor, and a lot can happen in a month. If it were to happen, for example, today, which I don't think it will, but if it were to happen in the next week or two, they still have to come to Juneau, show up, and then press the button to do it. So once it gets announced, people start to accept things, but you never know. It's just when it's such a thin majority like that, if something were to come together, there's no guarantee that it would actually happen when session starts. So I'm watching this very carefully. It's all really came out on this very loose text from Andrew Gray to Sarah Vance when he thought he was texting Sarah Hannon, which I kind of love that. It's so Alaska. It's so Alaska politics, the weirdness of it. I don't even know why he had Sarah Vance. I mean, he's a very progressive kind of, East Anchorage, going to the assembly meetings, very openly gay. Sarah Vance, Homer, very religious, very conservative. I mean, these are very different people. So good for Andrew. I mean, he's obviously got her number. So very bizarre situation. It led to a big, the story that came out in the landmine. You can go check it out. It's got the list of the proposed kind of organization. And like I said, several of the people that have been around for a while are very unhappy. The partisan people who would never want to even consider something like this are very upset, and people are hearing about it. So it's really kind of shaking things up here. So many freshmen, 19 out of 40. That's basically half the House is new, and this is never. I don't believe it's ever been anywhere near this number of new freshman legislators. So I'll be watching this very carefully. It could fall apart. It could blow up. It could come together. It's really hard to say, but I'll be watching it very carefully. And there's a lot more going on. We're going to talk about later in more live streams. But thanks for watching, folks. And if you like the landmine, if you like what we're doing, please consider going to alaskalandmine.com/donate, making a one-time or monthly recurring donation. You can also buy an ad if you're a business organization. If you have something going on, we sell ads on the landmine. We're happy to take your money for that and put up an ad. We have a big readership. We have a lot of people on the website. I'm happy to share the analytics. So stay tuned for updates from the landmine, folks, and watch this stuff in the House. It's going to be whatever happens in the House. It's going to be very weird. I'll be watching very, very carefully. So we'll talk to you guys next time, and thanks again.